The smoke still curled into the morning sky when I stepped outside, a steaming cup of black coffee in my hand. The sight that greeted me made my blood run cold. My police bike, my trusted partner through every chaos and crisis, was a charred skeleton smoldering in the driveway. It was the same driveway my grandfather had built with his own hands, the same bike I'd ridden into wildfires, hostage standoffs, and broken nights. Now it looked like a carcass left to rot. Across the street, Karen Whitmore sat perched in her golf cart, lazily sipping from a wine glass, watching the whole thing like it was a movie. Her eyes flicked lazily, almost amused, as if she'd been expecting this. I should have cuffed her then, right there. But what was the point? She didn't even know who I really was. 2 days earlier, I'd rolled into Willow Creek on that very bike, dusty, loud, a symbol of my return. After 15 years in law enforcement, I'd finally inherited this ranch, a quiet piece of land outside the town, far from the chaos I'd once known. But now, that peace was shattered. The silence I felt wasn't peaceful. It was wrong, heavy with something I couldn't place. Then I saw it, a small clipboard left on my gate as if waiting for me. Sure enough, Karen was there, marching out in wedge sandals and a salmon blouse so tight it looked like it might file a complaint on its own. She approached with that fake politeness, the kind that sounds sweet but bites underneath. "Sir," she said, voice syrupy, "this isn't a commercial zone. You can't store industrial vehicles here." I looked at her, unimpressed. The bike wasn't stored. It was parked. I said, "It's not stored, it's parked. And it's not a commercial vehicle, it's state property." She scribbled that down like she was making a note of her victory. "You're not on the HOA list," she added, tone sharp. "If you're not a member, you have no privileges here." I chuckled softly. "I'll take it up with the board." Her eyes narrowed. "I am the board." That was the moment I realized she wasn't just some busybody. She was the queen pin of her little empire, a puppet master twisting the strings of this town. And I was suddenly the only one willing to fight back. Later that night, I found a note taped to my fence, printed on a sheet with that crooked HOA logo, which looked like a kid drew it on Microsoft Paint. It was a warning. Final notice. Fine. $500 for unauthorized vehicle storage. No first notice, no warning, just a threat. I didn't bother responding. I'd learned long ago how empty their threats were. I sat on my porch staring at the stars, the coffee now cold when I heard it. Tires rolling slowly, a hiss, then a whoosh. The flames erupted instantly, lighting up the dark like hell's own spotlight. Someone had soaked my bike in something flammable, then set it ablaze. Plastic melted, the seat collapsed, and in the flickering orange glow I saw her, Karen, leaning against her cart across the street, raising her wine glass like she was toasting her victory. I didn't chase her. I didn't call the fire department. Just watched my partner in chrome and steel burn to ash. That bike had been with me through everything. Chases, riots, emergencies. It wasn't just a machine. It was part of me. And now, it was gone. EB. Next morning I filed a report. Kept my badge in my pocket. Digging through old contacts, I uncovered something worse. Dozens of complaints, foreclosure notices, small business shutdowns, all under the guise of community standards. But with no legal backing. Karen's HOA was a shadow government, a web of lies spun to control people through fear and bureaucracy. Then I found the real kicker. The HOA's supposed legal boundary was a lie. I pulled up the original maps and charter, and what I saw was shocking. The land I'd inherited was outside their jurisdiction. Karen had forged documents, expanded her control illegally. That was the fuel I needed to ignite the truth. I started digging deeper, checking records, speaking with neighbors, gathering evidence. They'd thought I was just a rancher, a nobody, but I'd been in this game long enough to know how to play, for keeps. Every fake notice, every forged signature, every illegal expense, they all added up. I was building a case, brick by brick. And then, I caught them. Late one night, with hidden cameras, I watched Tom and Blake, Karen's enforcers, sneaking around my driveway. They sprayed something on my garage door, then pinned a new notice, community violation. It was laminated, bold red, trying to scare me into reacting. But I stayed quiet. I knew their game. I called in an old partner, the one who'd been with me in the city. Told him someone was digging into my background, probably Karen, trying to scare me off. But I was ready. I'd dealt with worse. The real twist came when I saw Karen herself, watching again, her golf cart parked at the store, eyes glued to my property like a hawk. Not because she thought I'd crack. No, she was studying her prey, waiting for me to slip. She didn't realize I was already one step ahead. That night I found my water shut off. No explanation, just a note. Failure to comply with HOA irrigation guidelines. I laughed. My well wasn't part of their little fake rules. I turned it back on, sat in my kitchen and went back to my files. The truth was a weapon. I knew they'd try to escalate, but I was ready. And I was patient. I watched. I waited. Because I knew what they didn't. This was just the beginning. Their fire had started, but I was the one with the match. Would you like me to continue with the second chapter building on this tension and suspense? The knock came just after midnight. I was already awake, senses sharp, waiting. I slipped out of bed quietly, moving to the window with the patience of someone who knew better than to rush. Outside, two figures moved through the fog, their flashlights bobbing like wary animals. One pointed toward my garage, the other sprayed something along the fence line. Then, they disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the faint hum of a truck engine kicking gravel. I didn't breathe. I just waited. Checked my cameras. They'd been careful, but not careful enough. One figure had walked straight into the field of view. Tom, Karen's husband, in his old utility vest. The other stayed behind the trees. I had a hunch it was Blake, Karen's son. They knew I was watching, but they didn't care. This was no coincidence. I'd seen enough to know they were testing me. Again. Next morning, I found the damage. My garage door tagged in red spray paint. Community violator. A laminated notice nailed into the barn's wood, calling it a reclamation notice. They were escalating, trying to push me into reacting. But I stayed calm. I knew their game. Took a deep breath, then I made a call. Grace at the print shop picked up on the third ring. I asked if she remembered the order Karen had placed last year. Her own templates, her own fake seals. She hesitated, then told me about the invoice with the order code. I told her to hold on to everything, any copies, any details. Next, I drove to the town diner where I knew I'd find someone who'd seen Karen's tricks firsthand. I sat in my usual corner watching the door. It was quiet, except for the faint hum of the old fridge and distant chatter. A man named Clarence, who used to be the town treasurer, sat alone, stirring his soup. I knew his story. How they'd seized his house over fake fines, how he'd been robbed. I slid into the seat across from him. They did the same to your car, didn't they? I asked softly. He looked up, eyes haunted. Towed it without. Warning told me I'd violated some rule I'd never heard of. Said I'd signed away my rights with some paper. I fought, but they had the town on their side. I gave up, moved out. Wasn't worth it anymore. I nodded. Got any paperwork? From that time? He handed me an old faded HOA charter, typed, signed, notarized. It was the original. Clear as day. Only properties within the Oak Ridge development belonged to the HOA. My land, not even on the map. Their entire expansion was a lie. I drove, back my mind racing. I checked the boundary maps again, cross-referenced every detail. Karen's claims? Fabricated. Her control? Fake. Her authority? Built on forged documents and fear. That afternoon, I walked the perimeter of my ranch, noting the fake inspection stickers, the tags on the fences. Every note filed by the HOA was a lie, self-issued, forged, illegal. They'd created their own rules, their own codes, and enforced them like a shadow government. Then I saw her, Karen's golf cart parked at the store. She wasn't inside, but her eyes were there, watching. Not because she suspected I'd do something. No, she was studying her prey again. Waiting, calculating. I didn't confront her. I knew better. Instead, I set the trap. That night, I rigged 2 hidden trail cameras on the driveway posts, blended into the fence rails, invisible unless you looked close. I kept them there, silent witnesses. Midnight. Just after the clock struck 12. 2 figures slipped into my property, one spraying a canister along the fence, the other pinning a fresh notice on my garage wall. Faces revealed in the footage: Blake and Tom, the so-called enforcers doing Karen's dirty work. They thought they were untouchable. They thought I was just some off-grid rancher with no backing. But I wasn't alone. I had evidence. I had photos. I had the truth. The next morning, I watched them from my porch, pretending to be casual. Blake and Tom inspecting the damage, pretending to be concerned. Blake took photos. Tom jotted notes on a clipboard that was suspiciously empty. They knew. I was watching. They just didn't know I'd already called in backup. I dialed Deputy Linda, told her about the suspicious activity. She arrived within minutes, badge in hand, eyes sharp. I pointed at Blake and Tom, who instantly lost their composure. When I flashed my badge, they froze. "Step back," I ordered. "You're under arrest for impersonating an officer and attempting unlawful entry." Karen arrived in her own fury, screaming, "You have no right," but I cut her off. "Karen Whitmore, I'm Sheriff Renshaw. You're interfering with a lawful investigation." I kept my tone steady, firm. "You and your men are done here." She blinked, stunned, then backed away, realizing her game was over. Her face drained of color. Her eyes darted desperately for an escape, but there was nowhere left to run. I watched her stumble into her car, her face twisted with fury and defeat. The cameras caught everything: the lies, the threats, her final retreat. I knew then this wasn't just about my bike. It was about everything. The lies they'd spun, the control they'd wielded, the fear they'd sown. Now they were exposed. And I wasn't stopping, because this was only the beginning. "Would you like me to continue with the next part?" The courtroom was packed with silence. Every eye fixed on Karen as she sat trembling, her lawyer whispering frantically, trying to hold her together. I stepped forward, my voice steady, cutting through the tense air. "This isn't just about some HOA rules," I said. "It's about fraud, abuse of power, crime disguised as community standards." She flinched when I mentioned the forged documents, the illegal expansion, the embezzled funds. Her face paled. The judge's gavel echoed as he slammed it down, declaring the HOA invalid beyond its original boundaries. All recent fines were nullified. Karen's personal assets were frozen. Her schemes unraveled faster than she could blink. But I wasn't finished. I pulled out my phone and played a video: Blake and Tom sneaking onto my property, spraying something on my garage, pinning that fake violation notice. Their faces caught in the act, in the dead of night. I pointed at the screen. They thought they were invisible. They thought I was just some rancher with no power, but I had eyes everywhere. A hush fell. Karen's lawyer tried to object, but the judge silenced him with a glare. "This is clear evidence of attempted sabotage," I continued, "and it's just the beginning." Suddenly, the courtroom doors swung open. 2 deputies stormed in, carrying boxes of paperwork, digital drives, and forged maps. They began collecting evidence, confiscating files. Karen's face twisted in rage. She tried to protest, but her voice faltered under the weight of her own crimes. And then, from the back of the room, a familiar voice boomed. It was the sheriff, from the neighboring county, stepping in with a thick folder of documents. "We've got enough to charge her with conspiracy, fraud, and criminal misrepresentation," he announced. "The state's taking over." Gasps rippled through the crowd as they realized this was bigger than they'd thought. Karen's empire was collapsing, her carefully constructed lies now exposed as a house of cards. The judge looked directly at her. "Karen Whitmore, you're sentenced to community service, scrubbing graffiti and cleaning up your mess. You are barred from holding any public office or managing organizations for 5 years. And you're personally responsible for..." Restitution, fines, damages, everything. You thought you could control this town forever, but the truth has caught you, and it will burn you. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. She was broken. As she was led away, I turned to the crowd. This isn't just about justice, it's about ending the reign of fear, about reclaiming what's ours, and about showing that no matter how dark the lies are, the truth will always shine brighter. Outside, the sun was rising. The townspeople, silent but resolute, began to walk away, heads held high. The fake signs, the cameras, the threats, they were all gone. The silence that once haunted this place was finally broken. And in that moment I knew this wasn't just an ending, it was a new beginning. A fresh start built on honesty, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of a town that refused to be controlled anymore. Because some fires don't just destroy, they transform. And this town, it was reborn, stronger and freer than ever before.